Hey guys, I'm sure you've heard people say this over and over again, that you need to be stronger, that you need to push past your limits, that you should build confidence and learn to express yourself more, that you need to equip yourself with all the skills, the mindsets, the new ways of thinking. And then they ask, how much longer are you going to stay insecure just waiting around, hesitating in your life? They say, you've got to take action. We are the generation of action. We are the ones building the future, or something along those lines. Sounds inspiring, right? Very motivational. But what happens after that? Do you actually change just because someone keeps repeating those things every day? Can motivational classes or self-help books really change who you are or change your life? That's why today I want to share with you my personal thoughts on the darker side of the self-help industry. Are you interested? If you're ready, then let's get started. First, even though self-help books and personal development courses have only really boomed in the last 15 years or so, the truth is, life skills courses have actually been around for over 2,500 years. With pioneers like the Buddha, Lao Tzu, Confucius, Socrates, Jesus Christ, and the Prophet Muhammad. If we temporarily set aside the religious or spiritual elements, then all of their teachings, recorded in sacred texts, are basically life skills. They're lessons on how to live, how to behave wisely and righteously, and all the rules, practices, rituals, or moral teachings. Their ultimate purpose was always to guide people toward inner peace, to help them rediscover joy and happiness within themselves. And these teachings, these skills and practices, have been passed down and developed for nearly 3,000 years, until one major turning point came in the early 20th century. Specifically, around 1937, with the birth of two of the best-selling self-help books of all time, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill and How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. These were two books I was once very curious about and excited to read. And of course, the effectiveness of the principles and techniques they share is absolutely undeniable. In the self-help world, the release of those two books was like the invention of the steam engine in the Industrial Revolution, or the rise of the internet in the information age. Why? Because of the big shift in thinking that those books introduced. Pay attention. If Napoleon Hill's book had just been titled Think and Grow, then it wouldn't have been all that different. But the key part is grow rich. Not grow happy, not grow peaceful, but grow rich. And the title of Dale Carnegie's book is How to Win Friends and Influence People, How to Gain Friends and Build Influence Over Others. Can you see the turning point yet? If for 2,600 years before that, teachings were about finding inner peace and happiness, then now personal growth has become about achieving wealth and relationships and influence. It's about things outside of ourselves. And if for 2,600 years growth was aimed at peace and joy, then now growth is aimed at money, wealth, power, and fame. Let me be honest here. I have no problem with money, power, or influence. They're just tools. Very effective tools. The problem is when those tools fall into the hands of people who deep down are filled with anger, insecurity, or hatred. That's how we end up with people who are powerful and persuasive, like Hitler. And we all know what kind of tragedy he brought to the world. You get what I'm saying? So all those techniques and methods that are being taught, they're not wrong, but it's a huge mistake if they're not led by strong inner values, like courage, perseverance, honesty, kindness, or compassion. That's what we often forget when we're dazzled by money, opportunities, and fame. That's something I wasn't wise or deep enough to truly understand 11 years ago. And that same struggle is what pushed Professor Stephen Covey to write The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People back in 1989. Interestingly, after 30 years, that book managed to outlast all the self-help trends that came before it. And today, it's still considered the greatest self-help book of all time. Even though that probably wasn't Stephen Covey's goal or expectation to begin with, looking back on my own journey, it took me a few years, chasing every money-making trend, wealth-building course, and startup craze. before I finally started to absorb what he was really trying to say. In the end, I truly believe you can do whatever you want. Bake cakes, become a specialist doctor, arrange flowers, sell milk, take photos, raise pets, be a mom, or even be a badass big sister. As long as you know how to listen to yourself, how to nurture your inner peace, your strength, and your passion, then money and relationships will naturally follow, and they'll come with depth and fulfillment. You understand what I mean? It took me years of confusion to finally realize that truth. Next, the second dark side of the self-help industry appeared when people started using external results and numbers to measure each person's growth. Because the goal of growth is wealth and fame, it's very easy for us to compare ourselves. How much money do you have? How famous are you? How many followers do you have on Facebook? What position do you hold? So I think just like in school, the self-help industry began to be built on comparison and competition. Or in other words, on the belief that we are somehow lacking compared to some standard model of success. You're not confident enough, not brave enough, don't speak clearly enough, don't have a firm enough handshake. Your goals aren't big enough, you don't work hard enough or decisively enough. Of course, emphasizing your shortcomings pushes you to consume all the knowledge, skills, and new technologies to become stronger, better, cooler, so you can conquer higher and higher milestones of success. But do you know the biggest price we pay for that belief and feeling of lack inside? You'll never feel enough. You'll never feel satisfied, peaceful, or happy. Never. At any moment, we feel incomplete and keep searching and diving deeper into some flaws within ourselves. And somehow that process wears us out. It destroys our self-esteem. Then, after some time of being enthusiastic, fighting, and conquering, we start feeling small, insecure, and anxious again. And we can't accept that smallness, insecurity, and anxiety. So we throw ourselves into another self-help book, another motivational course, more expensive, with more successful, more famous teachers. Let's be honest, it's an exhausting journey. And then one day, you'll stop believing in self-help. That's when you were worn out. Maybe you've even burned through your money, and you don't trust those principles, skills, and new ways of thinking anymore. The worst part is we stop believing that we can change and grow at all. Honestly, I think it's a vicious, endless, and very costly cycle. But I also think it makes sense because the person who started this whole industry back in the day, Napoleon Hill, was actually obsessed with becoming rich, with making a lot of money. I want to emphasize this. I do not intend to deny the usefulness and depth of all those skills and new thinking methods. But what's much more important is that each of us approaches those tools with enthusiasm and love for our own dreams, values, and ambitions, not with comparison and harsh judgment toward ourselves. So instead of hating and rejecting all your mistakes and weaknesses, like how I harshly criticized my 18-year-old self and then dove into devouring self-help books, today I want to share with you how to accept and understand your own weaknesses. You know what I mean? Instead of criticizing and hating your weaknesses, we need to learn how to accept and nurture ourselves, to transform those failures and signs of weakness into opportunities to understand ourselves better through conscious awareness and action. And that is the foundation for true inner transformation in every individual. After all, at the core of education's origin, I believe it should start with compassion, or the voice of happiness, also called the gospel of Jesus Christ. Wow, the last thing I want to share about the self-help industry is that it really should be an agriculture industry. Because humans are not machines to be assembled, controlled, or fixed. We are organic beings who need to be nurtured, guided, and given conditions to grow naturally. In fact, this is a general failure of education when it gets industrialized like many other manufacturing sectors. Mass production gave rise to mass education, and the principle of mass production is to create a mold, then stamp it out over and over to produce identical products. When education starts treating its students like mechanical products produced on an industrial line, it begins assembling parts, equipping configurations and components, giving people presentation skills, leadership abilities, sales skills, oh, and don't forget, time management and work organization. And the pinnacle of this production technology is something I think is very special and maybe quite famous today. NLP, Neuro Linguistic Programming, or Mental Language Programming. Think of yourselves like a computer, and we're going to install the best software to help you succeed. All right, let's format. Erase all the junk and personal data, and then we'll reinstall the whole operating system and the latest, most advanced software. What I was really excited and curious to learn and practice about 15 years ago, over time I began to feel uneasy seeing many trainers using very forceful techniques to cram that success software into their students' heads. Again, I'm not here to criticize the value of those techniques, soft skills or software. I know they can be powerful tools that bring impressive results. But after over a decade of training, I believe we need a more humane approach to coaching, one based on understanding. I believe the very first thing a farmer needs to do isn't to dig the soil, fertilize, or water the plants, but to understand the seeds laid before him. Understand what each student, each person in front of you truly desires, what troubles them, what personal potential they have, and how much time and what kind of environment they need to fully grow. Sometimes the first job of a teacher is to truly understand each of their students, then lead, inspire, and create conditions for them to develop in the most natural and authentic way. Ultimately, I believe enlightenment is a process of awareness, recognition, and awakening, not programming or copying. Finally, let me sum up this heartfelt video. For those working in education and training, I hope you won't take my sharing as criticism or judgment. This is simply my personal reflection and collected experiences. And I think it's also a commitment for the next decade to nurture dreams about an educational approach based on understanding, love, and wisdom, helping each individual nurture their courage, personality, and inner peace. To my audience, those of you who still see me as a friendly face on YouTube through these shares, I hope you can realize that right in this moment, each of you is a perfect version of yourselves, and that you can listen to your own inner thirst and hidden strength so you can explore and guide your own transformation and growth. After all, this is your life, isn't it? I really thank you for patiently listening until now. Thank you for sharing, and I hope you'll continue to support our show. See you all in the next episode.